Hello friends, today we will discuss the importance of speaking in order to learn better and also how to speak well, that is, speak effectively. Language is a tool for communication and we know that speaking skill is perhaps the most important language skill. We often measure our success in language learning by the extent to which we can use the spoken language. Many students pass out of schools and colleges without any training or practice in speaking in general and public speaking in particular. Many of us still wish we could speak effectively and confidently. Many of us would also vouch that we have never done any speaking assignments either in schools or the colleges we went to. It is important to focus on teaching speaking so that we may learn not only to speak coherently and persuasively, but also do well academically. A simple reason is that we may have done well academically, but we understood the content better when we started teaching it or speaking it, so to say. There are perhaps two main reasons for this. First, as a teacher, we cannot afford the idea of cutting a sorry figure in front of the class by being ill-prepared or disorganized or incoherent. As a student, it is adequate to know the material well enough to appear in an exam. And if we are 80 or 90% correct, then we are declared excellent. It is quite another thing to know a material well enough to lecture on it. As students, we could afford to be brief and even vague in some situations. But as teachers, we cannot risk inaccuracy. In fact, we need to present the subject matter in a variety of ways, enough to motivate even the uninterested students to participate in the class and learn. And those students who are already motivated, we need to be prepared to respond to their queries. Another reason we learn better by lecturing on it is simply because even as adults, we learn better by doing. Active learning assumes that we learn concepts better by talking about them in our own words. Research has also shown that effective speaking is integral to logical reasoning. Sound logic underlies clear speaking and is also shaped by it. There is a lot of speaking going on in classes, but it is different from conscious teaching of speaking skill as an academic activity. So we can say that much of speaking in classrooms is a speaking to learn rather than a learning to speak activity. One research reported that there was a steady decline in the use of oral language in classrooms, and this was a major reason for the lack of students' abilities to reason and to predict as they progressed from lower to higher grades. Such a phenomena is found not only in the language classroom but in other classrooms as well. Classrooms are dominated by teachers talking and by written exercises. Researchers have called this phenomenon teachers talk and students listen. Another result of teacher-dominated classrooms is the negative effect upon students' attitudes towards learning. Teachers are often unable to see that literacy learning is a continuum. That is, it is an ongoing process of learning for the students. Learning before going to school, before they ever went to school, and learning in school are unfortunately viewed as two different processes, which they are not. Oral language, which is the major learning tool for children before going to school, becomes unavailable with the beginning of formal schooling. Given the new tasks of learning to read and write while being deprived of their speech, children tend to feel depressed and frustrated. Learning without any involvement begins to dominate and school gradually becomes a boring routine. We teachers become so involved with establishing rules, finishing the syllabus, covering the textbook, preparing students for exams, that we have forgotten that one of our original goals as teachers was that of stimulating thought. There is a deep relation between oral language development and the development of thinking abilities. Research has also shown that in any program on development of oral communication skills, critical thinking and reasoning abilities are also developed along the way. We can see that oral language is indeed an important link in the process of children's learning and thinking development. It is not merely a language issue, it is also an intellectual issue which deserves serious attention from both the teachers and the school administration. From the perspective of language development, oral language is a foundation for the development of other language skills. For most children, literacy learning process actually begins with speaking about their experiences and about themselves. We know it is by speaking that children learn to organize their thinking and focus their ideas. If we neglect development of oral language skills in the classroom, it will destroy that foundation and also adversely affect the development of other language skills. Research on critical thinking and cognitive development shows that the development of language has a close relationship to the development of thinking skills. This is particularly true for elementary level students. Before achieving proficiency in reading and writing, and even after achieving proficiency in reading and writing, oral language is one of the important means of learning and of acquiring knowledge. Throughout life, oral language skills remain essential for any intellectual activity and for the communication of ideas. We need to emphasize that just as writing is not confined only to the language classes, so also speech should be taught, practiced and learnt across the curriculum. At the most basic level, oral language means communicating with other people. But when we talk about oral language development across the curriculum, we do not mean teaching children to speak as much as we mean improving their ability to talk or communicate in their subject more effectively. Many studies have indicated that oral language development has largely been neglected in the classrooms. Experience seconds that. Most of the time, oral language in the classrooms is used more by teachers than by students. However, oral language, even as used by the teacher, very rarely functions as a means for the students to gain knowledge and to explore ideas. Underlying this fact are two assumptions. The first assumption is that the teacher's role is to teach. This is usually interpreted to mean that talking is the only way to teach. So teachers spend hours and hours teaching by talking, while the children sit listening passively as captive audience. Such teaching learning is one of the obstacles in the real development of oral language. Children passing out of these classes tend to carry this passivity over to their learning attitudes throughout life. The second assumption is based on the fact that children start learning and using oral language long before they go to school. Therefore, it is assumed that teaching and learning the oral language is not the responsibility of the school, and that the primary learning tasks of children in schools are reading and writing, which are seen as the two major aspects of literacy. We know that acquiring oral language is a natural process for many children. It occurs almost without effort. The ability to speak grows with age. But this does not mean that such growth will by itself lead to perfection. Remember that speaking is a skill and as such can be learnt and mastered. To speak in more effective ways requires particular attention and constant practice. We can say the three criteria for oral language competence can be fluency, clarity and sensitivity. To help children achieve these levels of development is our responsibility as teachers. The teacher can encourage students to bring their ideas and background knowledge into the class learning activities. To achieve this goal, the teacher must be a good and responsive listener to children's talk. Facilitation of a child's talking in the class is not enough for language teaching learning, however, but only provides an environment conducive to both teaching and learning. At this point, the teacher can raise questions concerning the content of the text. Here, one point should be emphasized. Implementation of oral language development across the curriculum requires teamwork. All content area teachers have to be actively involved in this task. The goal is not only to get children to speak, but also to have them learn and develop through speech. As the children's other language skills develop in the course of time, classroom talk can be directed more towards the goals of exploring ideas found in texts and sharpening the thoughts. Speaking to learn is the vehicle for increasing and deepening knowledge. So, what is speaking? To put it simply, speaking is a communication skill involving the utterance of language through the mouth. Speech is not usually simple basic communication, it involves thinking, knowledge and skills. It also requires practice and training. How can we help our students to develop oral proficiency? What do we need to do as teachers to facilitate that development? Let us think about this. Students need to get some instruction on principles and practices of effective speaking. Depending on your students, it may be general guidelines or maybe a detailed list of do's and don'ts. Also remember, beginning speakers may have nervous habits like fiddling with their buttons or clicking their pen or making sounds which disrupt smooth conversations. So there are certain things that we can teach our students about effective speaking. It is our responsibility that students develop speaking skills like coherence and persuasiveness. Let us take a topic, and with this topic as our example, let us see how we can teach effective speaking to our students. So the speaking task is, for instance, your school has decided to install solar panels and start rainwater harvesting. The school wants students' reactions to this project and also what they expect from this, so that the solar panels and the rainwater harvesting may best benefit both the school as well as the students. Now, this is a topic for slightly senior classes like 9th or 10th. Remember, the primary objective of this and other speaking exercise is to help students speak to learn and also learn to speak. Development of oral skills always helps cognitive development. So, with these objectives in mind, we give the students this task. For this task, we as teachers can form groups of 4 or 5 students in the class and ask each group to discuss the following. Number 1, how are these two related to the environmental crisis? Number 2, they can refer to textbooks and write how climate related matters are dealt with in science and social science. Also, what are the other green initiatives in the world? We can also teach them not to limit themselves to the textbooks. They can refer to library, they can surf the net, but look at other green initiatives across the world. Then ask students to give suggestions of how this project of installing solar panels and rainwater harvesting may be carried out in the school. Ask each group to come to a conclusion by evaluating the pros and cons of different initiatives. And finally, each group should give a presentation in front of the whole class. So this is a speaking task with an academic purpose. You can also organize this speaking event in the form of a debate with each side presenting its own point of view. This is a good exercise for them to learn not just presentation skills and organization skills, but also develop critical thinking on issues of human concern, on national concern. Students learn to collect and collate material and organize it to make it effective. You can also teach them that their presentations should have an introduction, and here you can teach them to begin with a greeting like good morning respected teachers and my dear friends, yeah, good morning everybody, good afternoon everybody. They can also express the purpose of their presentation. The objective of our presentation is, or they can say we are here today to talk about, this is the purpose. They can also give a structure of their presentation. So, they can say that we are 5 of us in this group and this presentation is divided into 4 or 5 main parts. First we will talk about this, then my colleague will talk about this, next we will this, and finally we will be looking at things. They can also give the timing of their presentation with something like our presentation is going to be for 15 minutes and for the last 5 minutes we will be happy to answer if there are any questions. They can, so they will be handling all that. Then we also talk about these examples are examples of signpost language. Now, what is signpost language? All the words and phrases that people use to indicate to the listener about what has just happened and what is going to happen next is known as signpost language. So, that is those words which, so to say, guide the listener through a presentation. This language, as you have just seen, is usually informal, so it is easy to understand even for the students. When they are presenting, students must have their audience in mind as also the purpose of presentation. Whom did they make that presentation for? For their classroom, the teacher or the principal. This is how they should organize their presentation. Of course, we have said that the spoken part needs to be very clear and very well organized, and depending on the resources and how comfortable students are, they can also use or not use PowerPoint presentations. But it is imperative that students practice their presentations many times before finally presenting it to the class. At this point, let me say that there may be students who lack the confidence to speak unassisted. They may wish to read, which is fine, but make sure that they practice reading their bit many times so that while presenting they may refer to their paper but not completely read from it. This can be distracting for their audience. Besides, practicing will also make them more confident. We all feel nervous, so tell them to take a deep breath and calm down. They should know the topic well, very well. That will give them confidence and control over the presentation. Tell them to use signpost language right through their presentation. Words and phrases like from here we move on to, now we want to talk about, okay, this brings me to my next point. So far we have looked at this phenomena, now let us look at it from a different perspective. All these and such and similar signposts are pauses which help the listener to absorb one point and prepare themselves for the next point. For the speaker, it indicates being well organized and in control of their presentation. At the end, the final speaker may summarize the presentation with something like, to sum up, we feel that, and so on. Teach your students also to conclude their presentations appropriately. They can again use signpost language, like we would like to end by saying, thank you for your attention and the time you gave. This is all we have to say now. And if you have any questions, we are willing to answer. This is one example of helping your students learn to speak so that they may speak to learn. There can be many more examples, like if the school organizes a Swachhta week, then each house in the class can present their work to the rest of the class. Or we may plan a classroom discussion on social issues like gender or discrimination or even climate change. So, spoken assignments can be a group work or pair or even an individual work, that is for the teacher to decide. Many times students will need prompts. So, we can have one wall dedicated to sentence starters or prompts or questions for different spoken activities. And we can keep on changing and adding to these word wall and also removing words or phrases from them. So, words and phrases like in my family we are, or when I was small, or in my previous school, these can be used as prompts on the word wall. Remember also that all mistakes and all inaccuracies in language use are steps towards developing communicative competence. Also are steps towards developing their intellect. Focus is on meaning and comprehension, and interaction is the strategy. Thus, the role of a teacher as a facilitator becomes very important, accepting student response and simultaneously guiding them towards better language usage. Learning happens through interaction. The focus here is on using language to complete a meaningful task. Interaction is again the goal of every strategy. So, the speaking task at hand should be urgent and relevant enough to require completion. Learners will engage in conversations or discussions, they may refer to library or other sources of information, and their ability to communicate fluently will definitely improve. The task assigned to them would depend on the level of learners. Again, that is where teachers' discretion comes into play. For instance, for beginners, we can ask them to retell a story, or even something as banal as reteach a concept which the teacher has just taught. Given this understanding of the importance of oral language skills, we should reflect on our attitudes towards teaching learning. As teachers, we should not assume the authoritarian role of the knowledge giver. Instead, we should see ourselves as interested facilitators in student learning. In emphasizing the role of oral language in the classroom, we are by no means implying that the teacher's role is not important. On the contrary, it requires a more demanding task of the teacher to facilitate a learning process in which children are given not only the opportunity but are also encouraged to speak and explore their own thinking. The teacher has to do more than just telling the children what he or she means, or more than interpreting the text for them. Instead, the teacher has several different roles to play. Some activities may require readjusting the furniture, for instance, arranging the tables and chairs in a circle or against the wall. Some activities may require permission for using the school hall or auditorium, while some other activities may require collaborating with other subject teachers, and so on. Not just the logistics, teachers are also needed for sometimes hand-holding of shy or nervous students. Further, the teaching learning objectives have to be clear to the teacher, and every spoken exercise is to be organized around well-articulated pedagogic objectives. So friends, to sum up, today we have discussed the importance of developing spoken skills of learners in order to facilitate cognitive development. We referred to many research studies which highlighted the relationship between oral skills and intellectual development. We also used an example of spoken activity to discuss various facets of an effective spoken communication activity. Finally, we discussed the very important role of a teacher in this development of her learners. Thank you so much.